Welcome to the T&T podcast, where we dive into the stories of career trailblazers and learn about their trials and triumphs along the way. I'm your host, Drew Hantla, and today we have Logan Whitney, a commercial real estate appraiser based out of Texas. On today's show, Logan details the ins and outs of becoming a real estate appraiser and the key elements for you to follow suit. He explains potential growth avenues after becoming a general appraiser and what you can expect with each opportunity. Logan breaks down what it means to be an appraiser and the multiple strategies used to determine a final valuation. He goes one step further to provide real-world examples of each strategy and how they are best deployed in each scenario. Follow along to hear more from Logan. We hope you'll enjoy. Logan, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, man, how you doing?
Tell us how you got started in the real estate world and eventually how you landed up doing the appraisal side.
My dad started his own appraisal firm in about 2001, a couple years after I was born. So I grew up watching him and grow that business and had like a pretty good idea of not any like the knowledge to do an appraisal, but what like that lifestyle looked like with the time on road and things like that. I mean, that kind of was the path I was going to be on going to college. He had gotten his master's of real estate at A&M, and well, at the time it was a different program, but what is now the master's of real estate. So that was kind of my goal from the jump. And after graduating undergrad and getting into the MRE program at A&M is when I kind of deviated from appraisal. I got an internship with a brokerage firm and did a good like year and a half interning with them while I was getting my master's. And that's kind of where I started leaning. It's just at the time it seemed like a sexier career field, which I guess it is. You know, you see these guys brokering $100 million deals and crazy stuff like that. And it's big, like high stakes, high adrenaline kind of field, which was, seemed attractive. So I interned with them and then got another internship with the CBRE, which is the largest real estate company in the world. Interned with them for summer. And I kind of like fell out of it because like that was when I was working with these guys and making, crazy money. And just the call always on the phone and the kind of networking sense is when I was like, man, just the reality of it, that's not me. I'm just not that kind of like type A person. I'm more of a nose to the grindstone sort of guy. So, from there, I kind of started going like backwards appraisal. I was graduating from the master's. I had talked to CBRE. They were asking if I wanted to extend the offer, which told them no. I didn't have a great experience there. And so I ended up working for my dad in appraisal. And that's how I got on my jump.
Breaking down real estate appraisal, can you help us understand what that is and why does the world need a commercial real estate appraiser?
On like the simplest idea is just valuing a property. And there's all kinds of types of values and reason why you need that. Kind of like on the most basic sense, we'll have people hire us to just give them a value because they're curious, or it's like a lot of times it's a state type thing. So like who gets what in the will and how are like things equated. And then you need an appraisal to get any type of loan with real estate involved. And so bank work is like kind of the more, like the one-offs are just like an individual calling you, and then bank work is a little bit more consistent. Kind of our other like avenue of business and type of appraisal that we would deal with is condemning authorities, TxDOT, or more local municipalities.
How do you necessarily conduct an appraisal? What are the ways to appraise a property?
There's three approaches to value, which are the cost approach, the income approach, and the sales comparison approach. Kind of the most simple approach and what's like kind of considered how market participants think about real estate, like, someone that's like operating as a buyer or seller, is the sales comparison approach, which is this 2-bedroom, 1-bath house on the street sold for $300,000. This other 2-bedroom, 1-bath house on the same street ought to sell for about $300,000. So buyers typically, that's how they view, like, why would I pay more for the same thing? That's sales comparison approach. And then the cost approach would be how much would it cost to put that house there? Factoring in depreciation, which also, buyers would think more like on the commercial side, why would I buy this warehouse when I could build it for cheaper? And so that would be the cost approach. How much would it cost to put there? And then the income capitalization approach is like, how much are the future cash flows that this property can generate worth to me in present dollars? Time value money principle from like accounting.
Are all appraisals considering all these different approaches, or do different appraisals for different properties consider different factors?
You should consider all three approaches within every report, but not all of the approaches, like you consider them, but they're not necessarily applicable, so you won't do them. So for like vacant land, the only approach that you would typically do is a sales comparison approach. I mean, there's no cost associated. That's only with like improvements. I mean, there's ground leases where you can kind of like value vacant lot, but that doesn't, at least has not come up yet since I've started working. I'm sure it does at some point. But generally it'd be just the sales comparison approach. And then like for, say, residential properties, like a typical neighborhood, it'd probably be different like a college town. But you wouldn't necessarily do the income capitalization approach because they're typically owner-occupied in this market. And so it'd only be applicable for the sales comparison and cost. Income approach is really only for rented properties, so office, warehouse, retail. That's really the only time you use that approach.
Backing up a little bit, is there necessarily a level of education experience you have to be an appraiser, or does it kind of change over time? Can you kind of explain to us what's required to get started in this field?
So just to get started, you only need to get a trainee license, which is super simple. It only requires, if I remember, like 90 hours of classes, which is technically all I am right now as a trainee. But there's several courses you have to take after that. I know it's 3,000 hours of experience, but the class hours, I got a lot of mine completed through the Masters of Real Estate program. A lot of those hours counted, so that's why I'm not quite as sure how many it takes. But it's a significant amount, but you have a year and a half to do that, or a year and a half is the minimum of time you can complete it in, because you also have to have those 3,000 hours over a minimum of 18 months. So for 18 months, you're going to be a trainee regardless of the courses you've taken, at least until you met that experience requirement, and then you can take your exam. I'm still in that first 18 months, so still waiting on that. A little nervous about it, but I think most people do okay. But me personally, I chose to get a master's because what my dad does is a lot of, what the company I work for does, is a lot of tech stock projects and projects with other condemning authorities where through power of eminent domain, which is the government taking private land for the public good. Typically, it's expanding a roadway, putting in a utility easement to service community. They have to take all that property and pay the owners a fair market value. And a lot of times it goes to trial over what's fair. And so in that area, being more educated is helpful. For example, when my dad goes to be deposed, it's Matt Whitney, 30 years of experience, a master's of real estate, member of the Appraisal Institute. All those credentials sound good and make your, testimony seem more legit. And that's kind of on my plate for the future. So I also got my master's.
Focusing a little bit more on that entry-level area, what is the competitive nature of those internships or those entry-level roles to even get started?
In appraising specifically, the average age, I think, now is up to 55. So it's a very old industry. We were told this a lot through the masters that if you want a job, appraisal is going to be where they're at. Not necessarily going to make the most money in commercial real estate, but there's just going to be a need. That's what it seems like I've seen. There's not many young people I've interacted with. Most other appraisers are older men that are within about 10 years probably retiring. So I'd say it's competitive, or not overly competitive. There's an opportunity out there for everybody.
And building off that idea of kind of having a role available for multiple people, are there different appraisal roles within that nature that allow people to kind of choose a specific route of appraising that they want to go down?
Yeah, there's kind of a couple avenues that they can. Everyone's, I think, first year and a half is going to be very similar. Just kind of getting your feet under you. But after that, I talked to my friend before coming on here that went through the master's program and is also doing appraisal, just because I know my experience working for a real small company. I was kind of cross-referenced to make sure I wasn't totally out of pocket. And we had 90% of stuff overlap. So she's in the same boat, but her focus is farm and ranch. And so she went in and they had their company, which is a little bit larger. I think they have 3 offices and about 30 people. They have a farm and ranch division versus my office. It's divided by type of work, which would be bank work and eminent domain work. So, different companies just divide their business up differently. And that's how people choose a sector.
And you bring up a really good point there in the ways that certain companies may structure different. Are there also different ways in which they structure you as an employee versus contract versus full-time versus a hybrid-ish role? Are you aware of those opportunities?
Typically, appraisers are commission work. It's a fee, the appraisal, but especially in some of the larger companies now, they hire appraisers on salary. I don't know what their salary is, and I think they get bonuses based on the amount of appraisals they write. I personally like the commission work. You work for this, you complete this, and that's how you get paid. A very clear way. You feel rewarded when you work harder. You're spending more hours, you write more reports, you make more money. So I prefer that. And that's how most appraisal companies are structured.
Logan, could you help provide us a little bit of like your day-to-day experience with the appraisal role and what we can expect in there?
So that's, kind of like my personal favorite part is the freedom you have to work when and as you need, which kind of back to the discipline point is if you're not working, you don't make money. But when recently I went and wanted to go on a little trip, cut off on a Thursday. And so I spent Sunday working and worked late a couple days and boom. I was free. I didn't ask one for time off. I didn't get it cleared. And so being able to do things like that is a huge, huge plus for me. Don't want to show up to work at 8. You don't. A lot of people don't. I choose to. But then just like having that freedom to work as you want to is awesome. But like day to day, I'll structure my week where I spend one day going to look at all the properties I need to. Maybe I'm on the road the entire day. That's just week by week. And then the rest of the week is just research and writing the reports. And I go back and forth on writing the report and researching as needed versus you generally need to know what all information you can gather versus gathering it all, then writing it all. That's another way that you can kind of free yourself up, do all your research, and then writing is as simple as putting this all into like the correct format. So you can do that out camping or, you can do that in a more relaxed setting, calling people, gathering data and stuff like that. But that's kind of the weekly grind.
You've mentioned a couple of times the variety of companies or other people within your network that you need to talk to be aware of to stay up to date. Can you kind of talk of like your general book of business and then what's your typical network look like so people can kind of help build that for themselves?
Appraisal is a lot of times by market. So, we at least know by reputation a lot of the local appraisers around here. But typically, you would only like call another appraiser for information if you kind of already had a relationship. It'd be odd to cold call an appraisal company just because, that's like kind of saying you do my work for me. So more so it's forming relationships with brokers, which can be hard to do because there's a lot of brokers. So frankly, there's a good chance if you call dude and you like them, you really, maybe you give him some data because a lot of times it helps him out too to just kind of have a current idea of the market. But, you might never hear from him again. And you might never have a, need to. But other times there's an office leasing guy that works through most of Conroe that I've called him 3 or 4 times now. So now, he's the one who even like approach me like, hey, have you seen any like ranked information for this building? So we kind of have like that little report going.
And on that note, do you feel like you really enjoy that kind of person-to-person contact and connection as you develop your business?
It's kind of along the lines of like the reason why I quit pursuing the idea of being a broker was that's not something I love. Like the cold calling, you turn up a sale, you need firm like details and trying to get hold of these brokers and ask them for data because frankly, you're not making the money, you're wasting their time. And some of them do make you feel that way. And I don't love that portion of it. And I think that's kind of one of my points I'm working on because the dudes that are more successful, they don't like hesitate to call phone. They pick up and do that cold call. So that aspect personally isn't my wheelhouse, but it's work. Like it's not the end of the world, but that is an area that I'm like trying to get better at.
Do you feel like there's a certain personality that may fit the appraisal role that someone should be aware of?
You got to call people, it's part of the job. I think it takes a good bit of discipline just because it's such a unstructured work style. There's no hours, there's no person like you're reporting to typically. And so I've like caught myself like having to be disciplined because if you're not, there's no one that's like there to tell you to get it together. And then, like classic attention to details, you can't put in wrong numbers, things like that. But that's, just checking your work and paying attention.
Were those first couple of weeks kind of a shock in regards to transferring from a very structured college career to now a very much open role of, hey, here's some work, you can do as much as you want and then make as much as you want?
It was for sure a shakeup, especially going to these small firms where there's not like a training department. There's people you can go ask questions to, but I at least was so naive. Like I didn't even know what I didn't know. And so it was super overwhelming. And looking back, it's like almost want to laugh. But like I'm freaking out over a simple 1 acre appraisal with 4 good comp. Like they were giving me like the most lowball stuff I just had at the time. It was like, where do I find the county tax information? There's all these like you don't know how to answer any of your own questions. And so that took a while, I'd say a couple months to like lose the panic. over like not being able to, just not knowing what you don't know. So like, at that point, I kind of at least knew like where to go look for information. And so if I didn't know something, I could like figure it out. And then I would only say like about 10 months in is when I finally was like, okay, I got my feet under me. Like I generally know what's going on. So it is a learning process, and like the speed at or how long it takes me to write a report is, dropped significantly because like I know where to look for all the information I need.
Yeah, now that you've kind of caught your stride and you're kind of moving along, do you kind of have a better vision of your road ahead? How much farther you feel you have in terms of like the development of where you're at now?
So that's, something that I just, being honest, was one of my reasons I started at brokerage, or that had that start interesting me was like in my head, if you're writing appraisals and you're getting, percent of whatever the fee is, you can only write so much a year. Like after you get, as efficient as you can be, there's still like some number of reports you can write. And so there's kind of a ceiling. I was thinking of it that way. So I was like, I want no ceiling. That's why I was going, one of the reasons I was going towards brokerage. But there's other things people start doing within appraisal, reviewing others' work, start testifying, things like that are like other avenue streams that there's still plenty of ways to make my money. You can make a lot of money just writing appraisals. So a lot of people are content with that. But if you want, a higher ceiling, there's other avenues to do that.
Do you have like 3 directions you have in mind, whether it be down like a licensing route or a certification or whatever it may be, just kind of help us build this idea of an appraisal career?
So my plan is to have most of my classes knocked out by the master's program, but I still had like 90 hours, and I've taken 30 or 60 of those, so I still have one more class to take. So I'll get that class knocked out before my experience is up, and I'll get certified, which at that point I can go write whatever appraisal I want. I can sign on a report. So like right now as a trainee, all my reports are signed by my reviewer, which pretty much is them saying taking liability. So if I like do something wrong, they're like on the hook for it. So it is kind of a big deal. Someone's not a big deal, but someone's not just going to sign a report if they think you're like not doing decent work. So like I was saying, for my license, that's the path I'm going towards, which is like Certified General, which would be what most commercial appraiser, not most, any commercial appraiser is going to have that license. But there are others. There's a residential license. I honestly don't know much about it. We can only appraise like single family residential or small condos. I think their requirements are a little bit less intense, but again, I'm not sure about that. After I get licensed, I'll have another about year until I've met the requirements. Apply to be an MAI, which would be a member of the Appraisal Institute, which is kind of like I'm doing finger quotes, can't see me, but like the certification to get within the appraisal industry. Meaning they do like a quality check. They're going to read a bunch of your reports, make sure there's no like ethics issues, which there's not a ton of appraisers that have it. But again, kind of like the same reason I was getting my master's, I want to kind of have those extra credentials. So that's my path. The only necessary is to be licensed.
Do you have maybe would be an average expectation for compensation along that route, and maybe how that would apply to more of an earnings per report versus those other routes you had mentioned, and kind of how that changes over time?
So, typically you're going to start on salary just while you're learning, because you're not writing reports, you're learning. But I did check, I just did my little self-research here. But so in 2023, which I started January 1st, 2023. So I did spend the first month not writing, and then 3 months, very slow. But I did write a total of 110 reports. I think a lot of other people in the office are writing 180, probably closer to 200. So you are writing a lot, but the fees, which you get like a percentage of, which when I say fee, like how much the client is paying the company, they range from like $1,000 to $5,500. And then, if you're getting like something crazy, a real like odd building, they can get all the way up to 10,000. They can get very large for real complex appraisals. And like $1,000 appraisal would be a simple vacant land, and like they kind of scale that cost with how complex the structure is or the situation is. And then you keep a split of that. So a lot of times you start out as a trainee, getting high 20s, maybe up to 30%. And then as you get licensed and certified, the company typically will bump you up. My friend who's at that medium-sized firm, she said they top out, I think, it was 47 to 48%, which is after, they've had all their licenses, they'll keep that, and I'll top out closer to like 52 or 53. So, not a crazy difference, but that is just a bigger cut that I'll get to keep over. So I'm working at a bit larger firm.
All right, and now we're going to add in a question we got from the audience. Today we have Nathan Gill, who commented on Instagram. He said, what are the best commercial real estate categories? And to add to that a little bit, which do you think have over and underperformed your expectations over the past couple of years as you've kind of analyzed and learned how the market's moving?
I guess like sectors would be like kind of the most applicable way to think about it, but industrial, multifamily, office, residential are kind of like the major areas. And, I've only been actively following any of this for a year, or as actively, but COVID, really hit the office, work from home. A lot of companies haven't come back. And so, office rates are still like just getting similar to what they were before COVID, real slow growth. And so there's, a lot of hesitation there. And again, I'm not a broker, would know like a lot better just because they're forward looking, trying to sell the future, versus appraisers are back looking. We're looking at data. So I'm kind of thinking a little more retrospectively than others would. But industrial's doing well. Houston is a big industrial place, industrial market. And of course, multifamily as well. A lot of people moving to Texas. That's what's had the biggest growth. Multifamily brokers are killing it right now.
Awesome. We appreciate that. And for reference, or anybody wanting to post a question in the future for a future guest, you can always catch us on our Instagram or our YouTube to respond there. Logan, hopping back into the appraisal role, where do you feel that this opportunity is heading, and kind of how do you see it changing over the future?
I kind of see myself spend the next 10 years just, writing reports, building experience, doing some like small depositions. I've actually gotten to do one, but it was uncontested. So it was essentially me just going in and explaining my report to the judge or the county commissioners, and there was no one there to disagree with me. So it was super relaxed. But doing more of those that maybe are contested, where you are getting asked, well, why did you do this versus that, which will be intense when it happens. But doing small things like that, just writing appraisals for the next 10 years. And kind of from there, it would be continue on with Whitney & Associates and kind of take over a role similar to what my dad's doing now, which is a lot of depositions, little local disputes, and a lot of like generating business on the road, FaceTime with these acquisition groups that like eventually end up hiring us. That would be one route, or kind of the more typical route that people might go into, and I'm really considering, would be like appraisal review. So in like an appraisal review, you would be working for a company, or you could do this as an individual, which individual is more, it's hard to get your name out there. But TechStop, for example, when I submit a report and then send it to a reviewer, even though we reviewed it in-house, then this reviewer person, which is typically someone with a decent amount of experience, will look over, check, just make sure there's no errors before they send it on to the landowner. And so that's a good career route. You have a lot of freedom. You don't even typically have to go to the property, so you can really do it from anywhere.
If you had one major piece of advice for someone looking to get into the appraisal world, what would you have for them?
I'd say commit to it. It's the bar of entry is not like undoable for anybody, I think. It just takes committing, learning, and taking the classes. There's things you have to know. It's not like it's extraordinarily easy, but I don't think it's anything. The math isn't super complicated. The research isn't undoable. There's not something secret to it that only a certain person can do. So, I'd say go for it. That'd be just the biggest advice I'd give to someone wanting to start. Get your classes going. Contact local appraisal firms, see if they're hiring. Small ones, they're much more constricted by how the ebbs and flow of work are going. But if you get companies that like have hiring departments, they're looking a lot of times. So I'd just say go out and go for it.
Logan, we appreciate you being on today, man. You've provided so much information, and we wish you nothing but the best, man.
Thanks. It's fun being on here. I enjoyed listening to a lot of yours. I just saw you had, I think, Game Warden on. So I haven't seen that episode yet. I'm going to look forward to that before I watch it tomorrow. But I really appreciate what y'all are doing, learning more about other industries. But thank you for having me on.
If you enjoyed today's episodes, then feel free to explore the rest of our offerings with the Brothers Frontier Studio. If you're not already, you can follow us at Brothers Frontier on Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. With new shows every week and daily content on our socials, we hope you'll find what you're looking for. If you haven't already, please leave us your feedback with a comment or rating to let us know what you thought of today's episode. Thanks for listening. We hope to catch you on our next episode of the TNT Podcast. I'll see you guys later.